Hi, this is Jiffy, Quantitude intern and paralegal. Well, paralegal. I've been taking night courses this season. Anyway, as per counsel of our legal team at Quantitude International, we hereby state that Dr. Miles' opinions are his alone and in no way represent the company with whom he is currently employed, and indeed may well be incorrect, as listeners may wish to verify with their favorite search engine. Further, the name of Dr. Miles' employer has been stricken from the entirety of the episode, mainly because we don't want to attract attention of members of their legal department, who Quantitude International lawyers tell us get paid a lot more than they do. Thank you.
Welcome. My name is Patrick Kern, and along with my friend Greg Hancock, we make up Quantitude. We are a podcast dedicated to all things quantitative, ranging from the relevant to the completely irrelevant. In this week's episode, Greg and I have a lovely conversation with Jeremy Miles, who is a quantitative methodologist who has worked in both academic and industry settings. Jeremy draws on his own extensive experiences to describe what an industry job is like and how one can prepare to move into this type of position. Along the way, we also discuss subconning expertise, mystery companies, Americans' mispronunciations, Quantitude International, avoiding math, statistics versus biostatistics, fighter pilots with PhDs, Eau Rouge, game rooms, 99% missing data, being correct-ish, harumphs, pay cuts, Kai Ryssdal, and Lewis Hamilton versus George Russell. We hope you enjoy this week's episode. Greg, when you came up through the system, were you mostly channeled into academic-related jobs, or did people talk to you about other kinds of options?
I'll go with answer C, Alex, which is nobody really talked to me about anything. There was not a tradition in my program of people going necessarily to academia or industry, and it just wasn't discussed. I mean, like until I was in the dissertation phase, so I didn't really have any idea what the heck I was doing.
Either did I. Mostly what we were tracked for were academic-like jobs. The main coin of the realm was tenure-track assistant professor. That's what the golden ring was. But then there were also very academic-like jobs in places like RAND or RTI or 3C. Those were in play a little bit, but there were also the testing companies, so ETS and College Board. But what it means is you and I did a prior episode, which we did a deep dive into academic jobs in the job talk, but neither one of us know diddly squat about jobs in the private sector.
Not at all. You're absolutely right.
For loyal listeners, you know that we have a long history of when faced with a problem we know absolutely nothing about. Now, notice I'm emphasizing absolutely. If we know even a trivial amount about it, we continue to talk about it as if we know.
We can record for hours.
But if it is an actual absolute zero, we subcon and we bring in an outside expert.
That's right.
And that is what we have done today. We are very excited to have a conversation with Jeremy Miles. Greg, did you talk to our law division this morning?
Well, I had a whole intro worked up for Jeremy, and I got a call from legal, and I basically had to redact absolutely everything from it. So I don't know how you want to do an intro for him.
Quantitude International. We have law offices on every continent.
Yeah.
Weirdly, including Antarctica. There was the
not a lot
penguin
of
incident,
action,
and I just don't want to talk about that again.
You never know.
We are going to talk to Jeremy, but he works for a company you have heard of as a senior research scientist. I am going to let him talk about it to the extent that he would like. So, Jeremy Miles, welcome to Quantitude.
Welcome.
Well, thank you.
Very briefly, I can say he got his BA in psychology at Newcastle University and PhD at the University of Derby.
I knew Patrick would say that wrong. It's Derby because it's British.
Is it?
It is Derby, yeah, but that's okay. Americans always get it wrong.
No, it's the Irish in me. It's Derby. Come on, man. I apologize. At the University of Derby.
Nice.
People love hearing origin stories because not one of us takes a sober straight line shot into where we ended up. How did you get to where you are now?
Very long ago, I wanted to do science. I wanted to be a scientist, and I studied physics and chemistry and things like that in high school. I found that everything's turned into math, and math kind of got boring. Biology turns into chemistry, chemistry turns into physics, physics turns into math. So everything was becoming math. And I'm like, okay, I want to do a science that is not going to turn into math. Psychology, that's going to be safe. Psychology is never going to turn into math. So I did psychology, and, I finished that. I want to be a social psychologist. So I got a job as a research assistant at the University of Derby, and that let me do a PhD. And I was in health psychology. And it kind of turned out that every time anybody had a theory in sort of social health psychology, their methods were all a bit crappy. They have this elaborate, complicated theory. They're saying, and now we're going to hammer this into a 2x2 and over. And so the whole time, I was thinking, your methods aren't good enough. Also, it turns out social psychology and health psychology, they're really hard. Okay. You need to think about stuff, and you need to have theories and new theories and plans and write introductions and discussions. But if you do the methods, you just say, yeah, I don't think that's a very good measure. No, that didn't test that theory. So I did that. And it was actually on psoriasis, which is a skin disease. And I was looking at the stress and psoriasis and psychology. And a lot of people will say that stress causes psoriasis. So you have stress, and that increases the severity of your psoriasis. And I'm like, yeah, but what's stress? What do you mean by stress? Is it like I'm anxious right now? Is it that bad things are happening? Is it that I'm responding in a particular way? Is it bad things that take a week? Is it bad things that take a month? Is it one scary bad event? What's the process? How long does it take? If I'm stressed today, does my psoriasis get worse tomorrow, or in a week, or in a month, or in a year? We've got to measure these things. So my PhD turned into not about whether these things are true, but how would you work out if they were true, and what method would be appropriate or not? I did the PhD at Derby, and then I worked at Derby for a little while, and I worked in a psychology department, I think for 2 years post-PhD. And then I moved to the University of York. I worked in a health sciences department. They called me a lecturer in biostatistics. So when students came in, they would say, oh, I don't like statistics. That's hard and boring. And we would say, nah, this is biostatistics. Biostatistics is fun and interesting. And by the time they worked out that was a lie, because statistics and biostatistics are basically the same thing, it was kind of too late and we had them trapped. So I worked there for 5 years, and I always expected I was going to work in academia. And then I saw an email on SIMNet, the mailing list about structural equation modelling, from a chap called Terry Schell. And Terry Schell worked at the Rand Corporation. And he said, we're looking for a psychologist who knows about latent growth curves, multi-level models, and confirmatory factor analysis. Now, I knew about latent growth curves very conveniently because around the year 2000, I went to Chapel Hill to take a class by Patrick Curran. I can claim that I know something about latent growth models. This is based in Los Angeles, and I've never been to Los Angeles, so that'll be exciting. If they interview me, I'll get to go there, and that'll be fun. So I banged off my CV, and they said, come for an interview, and come for 3 days before to get over the jet lag. So I had this fantastic time. Actually, at the end of the day, they told me I'd got the job.
Wow.
I found out they'd interviewed a few people before me, and I think they interviewed me last because I was a pain in the butt to get there. If we're desperate, we'll get this guy. If we can't find anybody else. I wonder about the people who they interviewed who weren't me, who were considered. And I've never found out who these people they interviewed before me were, but I've got a lot of suggestions. Anyway.
Well, Jeremy, we've got them here today.
Yeah, so I worked at the Rand Corporation, which is in many ways a fantastic place to work. You're doing research all the time on all sorts of interesting applied things. The rule is that your research has to be policy related. But it turns out almost anything can be policy related. I did a lot of work on measurement of post-traumatic stress disorder. But you see, what has confirmatory factor analysis got to do with policy? Well, you've got to have a policy about how you treat people with post-traumatic stress disorder. Therefore, we need to know how to measure it. Therefore, we'd better do some confirmatory factor analysis. So I could argue that confirmatory factor analysis was a policy-related analysis. Also, Rand has a university attached. I've never fully understood this, but it has this tiny, tiny university. It's called the Pardee Rand Graduate School. It has one course, which is a PhD in policy analysis. It used to admit about 25 to 30 students a year. And every time there was enough demand, I would teach a class on applied psychometrics. Rand grew out of the military originally. It's a very interesting place. It grew out of the military after the Second World War, and it still had a lot of military links. And so there are these guys in my class, and they sit at the back, and they concentrate really hard. And I say, so, what are you going to do when you finish this PhD? Are you going to do psychometrics or measurement or work for the World Bank or something? And they said, I'm going to be a fighter pilot. And it turns out that the Air Force Academy sends their very best students to RAND every year to do a PhD and then teaches them how to be fighter pilots.
And if they can survive your class specifically...
Well, that's right. Yeah. Yeah.
It's a big weed out course. You got a bunch of guys with aviator sunglasses out in the hallway crying.
Who the hell is that?
Maverick to range control. Entering point Alpha. Confirm green range.
Green range is confirmed. I don't see an event scheduled for you, sir.
Well, I'm going anyway.
I'd ride my bike to work and I go to the locker room dressed like this. I'm wearing an I Heart R t-shirt actually today. I should have worn my Williams Formula 1 t-shirt instead.
Okay, we are at minute 14 of the recording. It's going to be less than that in the actual episode.
Yeah.
It took that long to get to F1. So Jeremy and I are diehard F1 fans, although he eclipses me tenfold because he sent me an Alex Albon Williams cap that I have right here next to me. But more impressively, Jeremy, you sent me a selfie of you standing on Eau Rouge.
Yes.
It is the most famous stretch of a racetrack in the world, and Jeremy is standing in the middle.
If you ask your favorite LLM, what is the most famous, iconic corner in any racetrack in the world, it will say Eau Rouge.
The Eau Rouge corner in Spa, probably the most famous corner from a driver's point of view. It's not only fast, but it's challenging with the amount of elevation change. That's what makes it so exciting.
And he was standing in the middle of it.
Just people, no cars.
And then the next picture is him being led off in handcuffs. But anyway, so you are at RAND.
I'm at RAND. It's quite intense to work at RAND, and I always imagine I would go to work at a university. And I always imagined that these large tech companies that hire data scientists did kind of boring stuff. I knew a guy that worked there, and he told me that one of the questions he'd been asked to work on is how do you do a Poisson regression with 5 billion rows and 100,000 predictors? Because it won't fit in the memory of anything. But they want to do that regression. And I'm like, I don't know, and I don't care. There used to be, in LA, a data science and R meetup group, and people would talk about their stuff they did using R. And there were two people who worked at the time. Oh, I said the bad word. At this company. So the two people worked at this company, and they talked about the human evaluation. And what they do is they show ads to people, and they ask them questions about the ads. And there are thousands of these people, and they pay them to get information about ads. This is a measurement exercise. And I'm like, whoa, this is a measurement exercise about people. This is interesting. And there was a vacancy on the team. And so I applied for that job, and I got that job. And that was almost 10 years ago. So I worked there for 9.5 years. And then there was a big reorganization because, how shall I put this? AI stole my job. There was a big reorganization, and they decided they had too many data scientists, and they didn't want me anymore. And so then I moved to the department of the company that has a website that you can put videos on. You can watch other people's videos on this website. And I work on that, doing something sort of similar. We were trying to make sure that bad ads don't appear and the good ads do appear. We want people to be happy with their ads. In the video side, we just don't want bad videos with bad stuff in. We don't want sex and nudity. We don't want child harassment. We don't want kids on their own. We don't want hate speech, that kind of thing.
Because you are in the division in this unnamed company that posts videos in the trust and safety division.
That's right, yes. We talk about safe videos. A safe video is a video that will not offend you or your kids or your grandma. We want people to trust that if they go to this website and they watch videos, they will not see anything that they didn't want to see or that they shouldn't see.
So you and I do go back a quarter of a century. I did a little internet stalking just to kind of see what you've been up to recently. And this may pivot us a little bit into what we want to talk about. Somebody was asking something like, how did you get a job at this big company? And your reply was, I applied.
Was that your Quora answer?
Yeah. That is my core answer.
That was it. I applied.
There is a huge random factor in applying for these companies. What they say is they hate false positives. They really don't want to hire anyone they shouldn't hire, but they don't mind false negatives. And they say, we will have a huge number of false negatives in order to avoid false positives. Except Netflix. Netflix really likes firing people. So Netflix has no problem with, yeah, we'll hire this person. Oh, okay, we don't like them, they're fired. The other ones tend to dislike firing people. I do a lot of interviews. I don't know why I do a lot of interviews. I've asked, actually. I've asked if it's because I'm a really great interviewer. And apparently that's not it. But they couldn't tell me why. And then I read the other interviewers' notes, and I think, wow, I'm glad I didn't ask that question, because I would have been in trouble.
As Patrick and I have zero familiarity with the industry, all I know I got from watching movies. So I want to ask you about a day in the life, but I'll tell you, I assume that a day in the life is there's a movie room where you work, there's a ping pong room, there's a place where you have unlimited snacks, there are showers, there are beds. All of that, I'm assuming, is just part of your day-to-day life where you work.
One interesting thing is I think that the company is very good at PR. If you search on your favorite search engine for pictures from your favorite search company offices, there's all sorts of cool-looking stuff. What you actually get is you get a desk. You don't even get a cubicle. Everywhere I've worked before, you get an office. You get a desk. My manager sits next to me. If I knock my coffee over, it lands on his desk. His manager sits behind him. It's a bit like the head of department sits next to you, the manager, the dean sits behind you, and then his manager, who's the vice president, sits a few feet from me. They can look and see my screen. It's great when you work in ads, because if you're looking at ads, someone can say, well, what's that webpage you're looking at? You're looking at Amazon. Yeah, I'm just checking this ad. Yeah, it looks good, I think, yeah. Yeah, that's a nice ad, yeah. Goes to the Amazon page.
You're not ordering dog food?
No, of course not. I'm checking the dog food ads. Let me look at another dog food ad. Oh, yeah, I like that one too, yeah. If you look on the video side, you can be watching a video. They say, this video, yep, I think that's fine. Yeah, no, there's no nudity or anything. No, I can't just watch a bit more to be safe. Yep. They make the office all very cool, but you get a desk. And I have space for about 5 books. And there's lots of cool stuff. There is a ping pong table and a video game room and a pool table. We were showing someone around. This is the game room where there's an Xbox. There is every console you can think of going back some number of years. There's a Switch. There's probably a Switch 2 now. There's an Xbox. There's a Game Boy. I think there's an Atari, a pinball machine. And I mean, you know how you get bored of the same pinball machine after like 6 months? They rotate them between the offices. You get a different pinball machine. There's a skee ball. And they said, this is just to impress interview candidates, isn't it? And we're like, yeah. Because if you want to play video games, you don't want to do it at work. I've got work to do. And if I've not got work, I'm going to go home and play video games. My kids came to the office once and they're like, oh, an Xbox. How do you plug it in? How do you turn it on? And I'm like, I don't actually know. The snacks are an exercise in willpower every day. Every day you walk past the snacks.
So what you are telling us, though, is that you maintain a physical presence at work as opposed to virtual, or how does that balance occur?
They are quite strict on that. The rules are you need to be in the office 3 days a week, and it's almost certainly Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday. I understand why, partly because everything is weird and complicated and different. And it's very, very useful to have someone next to you who you can poke and say, I am stuck. Why won't this program run? What's wrong with this bit of code? What's wrong with this thing? And people say, I'm senior. I've been here a long time. I know what I'm doing. I'm like, yeah, but you're here to support the other people. And you can ping someone or open a video conference with them. But it's kind of a bigger barrier than just turning around and poking them with a poking stick. I need Patrick's poking stick.
See, it's all about poking sticks. Okay, so we got the candy and we got the video games that are not plugged in but are props for people who are interviewing. What is part of your day in terms of how successful you were in avoiding math? Because I'm finding this quite funny that you went into psychology to be a scientist to avoid math, and you are co-author of an extraordinarily popular book entitled Discovering Statistics Using R. We can see how well that worked out for you.
Miserable failure, that was.
What is a day of work like for you?
It actually has some really interesting statistical and methodological problems. We have ads, okay? So we might have 1,000 ads, and we want to ask some people about these ads. And we might ask 500 or 1,000 people. We'll ask 3 people to rate each ad. I'm doing a psychometric exercise. A person is the equivalent of an item in a scale, and an ad is a person. You know, when you're teaching and you teach introductory students, the first thing you say is, a row is a person, and now a column is a person, and a row is an ad. It took me a long time to get used to that. You have this data frame. It's got 1,000 rows and 500 columns, and every row has 3 values in it. So 99 point something% of my data are missing. I'd like to know the reliability. If I load up the psych package and I say alpha, whatever, and it says, meh. The covariance matrix is like empty. There's nothing in it. So we have this kind of problem of how do you analyze this data? How do you do an experiment? You want to calculate what the score would have been for that ad had every rater rated it.
It's interesting that you raise these kinds of things because when we train people in our graduate programs, our goal really isn't just to train them to do a set of methods and then go out and apply those as is. What we're trying to train people to do is to be able to solve their own problems, because the problems that they're going to face will often look very little like the off-the-shelf kinds of things that we're able to cover. And it sounds like you are experiencing a lot of departures from whatever standard kinds of things are that you encountered. You have to build it right there in the workplace, right?
Oh, yeah, that's a really good point, is that these are sort of unique problems, and no one else that I know about has ever had a problem like this before. Mm-hmm. So the kind of person that succeeds is often the kind of person who says, I want to try and solve this problem. How do I do that? This is a weird new problem I haven't encountered. Mm-hmm. How would I go about solving it? How do I calculate the difference between these two groups and get the standard error right? This is an interesting difference between academia, actually, that you're writing a paper, you're doing a research project, and you say, I can't get the standard error right. Well, I'm not going to try. I'm going to do it. I can't publish the paper. You can't publish a paper where you say, well, I've tried to get the standard error of this difference, and I think the difference is about right-ish, and I think the standard error is about right-ish. The journal's, the second reviewer, is not going to like it. My manager or my stakeholder, the other people in the company, are going to say, I need an answer. Like, I need to choose. Do I do this thing? Is it better? And I'm like, well, I can't calculate the correct p-value. And they say, well, can you calculate the correct-ish p-value? And I said, well, I mean, this is like as good as I'm going to get. I mean, it's often the case when you do a search on your favorite search engine, it has to have an algorithm to choose the ads to show. But if stuff doesn't appear within about half a second, you get bored. So you've got about half a second to pick an ad. And so what's happening is it's running some sort of logistic regression in the background and it's iterating. And after half a second, it just says, stop, we can't go anymore. I am not giving you the correct answer. I'm giving you the closest to the correct answer that I can get within 500 milliseconds. And so this is kind of a big difference, is like best answer you can get because I have to choose. I have to have an answer.
I'm thinking about you as Gossett at the Guinness Brewery, because I think his job description was basically drink and make up. Imagine you made something up that had broad methodological appeal and it wasn't just solving this specific problem that you encounter in your workplace. Could you disseminate that? Is that even a part of what you do or could do?
Yeah, it is actually. It's a slightly arduous process. The company is very, very, very nervous about data leakage. I've worked in academia and we have the research governance committees who insist on keeping data in specific ways, and with some data sets they can't be accessed in different ways and there are restricted versions of data sets. They are monstrously nervous, like an order of magnitude more. If I want to access specific data set, first I have to get permission and explain why. And then any analysis I run on that data set, I sometimes have to say why I am running this analysis, what I am trying to do. And that gets stored along with the code that I used. And in 6 months' time, someone can come back to that code and say, why did you access that variable? That variable wasn't what you were doing. And that variable might have contained some confidential information. We are very, very, very nervous about confidential information. So, publish things, it has to be ensured that you have not leaked anything that might be considered remotely confidential. And so it's this fairly arduous process to get it done. But yes, it does happen. One of my favorite examples is the causal impact package. There's an R package, and I think it's in Python now as well. It's called causal impact. And it's a really, really clever way of doing a kind of propensity scoring. And it's the propensity scoring when you've got a time series. So you want to do an experiment on advertisers. You've got Ford and you've got Honda, say. And you say, okay, I'm going to give a deal to some advertisers and see if they advertise differently or pay more. And so Ford are in the intervention group and you give them a good deal of their ads, so they spend more on ads. Honda are in the control group and they notice that Ford is spending differently. Well, your intervention has leaked into the control group. Well, now what my counterfactual should be is not what are Honda doing, but what would Honda be doing had I not done the experiment? And that becomes my control group. And that changes over time. So there are seasonal effects. You know, people advertise differently at Christmas. They advertise differently in the summer. So all these things will have an impact. The causal impact package, which was published, I think, 10 years ago, It's quite well known for doing that analysis.
Are you rewarded? Because it sounds like, that's a pain in the ass to have to go through all that.
The guy that did it is like completely brilliant and very successful and promoted and important and well known inside and outside the company. And is that because he published that, or is it just because, brilliant people do brilliant things both inside and outside the company? So it's certainly not punished.
That's motivating. Well, you won't get punished for doing it.
One thing I find fascinating when you and I have chatted over time is the difference in the timelines of how things progress in academia and how they progress in your setting. Coast to coast on a study, you might do that in a week.
Yeah. One of the first studies I did when I started working there was about the way that ads are displayed on phones. Someone asked us to do this study. So that was on Monday. So we designed it by Wednesday, and then we collected some pilot data, and that was done by Friday. We analyzed the pilot data, then designed the full study, did the full study. It took about a week to collect the data, analyzed the data, wrote it up. It probably took a month end to end to do this study. Mm-hmm. Another interesting thing about that is then, 2 years later, they changed the phones again. Nobody cares. That study is completely irrelevant. It's deleted. Doesn't matter anymore.
So, Jeremy, something that you said earlier made me wonder about this. Imagine you say, there's this type of analysis I want to do. Let me just go to my favorite search engine and look for an R package. How much do you have that kind of freedom, or how much are your hands tied to be able to do those things that otherwise in academia we kind of do every day?
Usually you're fairly free. So we can't use CRAN because you can't just download code and then run it. Try and download an R package from GitHub and then compile it and then stick it onto the company server, and the security guys freak out and say, where the hell is it? What's this? Where's this come from? What? No. That's actually a pain in the butt with Stan. Stan, the Bayesian package. The reason it's very, very clever, the reason it's very fast is because you write your code in R or Python, and then it writes that code as C++, compiles it and runs it. So you're actually running a model in C++. So it's super fast. The computer you're running on says, what the hell is this? Where's this? Where's this C++ come from?
You know way too much about this in their reaction. I'm suspecting that you learned this the hard way.
I've learned a lot of things the hard way. So there is an approval process to go through. And it takes about, usually about a week. So you download a package, you get it approved, and then you can do it, and it's okay. One of the big pains, though, is that they have something called the one version rule. And the one version rule is you can only have one version of any package on the whole system. I wanted to upgrade LME4 because I wanted to use a package that depended on a newer version of LME4. So I tried to upgrade LME4 by going through the approval process. LME4 relies on a C++ package called Eigen, and Eigen is used by a bunch of people and when I updated the version of Eigen, other stuff didn't work. That broke somebody's code somewhere else. So I couldn't upgrade LMA4. So I emailed them and say, hey, do you mind fixing your code so it works for the new version of Eigen? And they say, we got better things to do. Because it's not really anyone's job to do it. The new version of ggplot2 has just come out. I'm very nervous about updating that. All the code that exists has to run. When R4 upgraded to R4.1, the default for read.csv strings as factors changed from true to false.
Oh, jeez.
That meant you had to search all the code for anyone who used read.csv in R and make sure they had specified the default correctly. And I think I've forgotten how many it was 10,000 or 100,000, some insane number of times. And every single one of those had to be changed. Mm-hmm. But even upgrading R from R version 4 to version 4.1 takes somebody weeks of work.
So the fun in talking with you, beyond all the obvious reasons, except you and I have a deep fundamental disagreement as to whether George Russell is a big baby or not. But
he's clearly a future world champion, so...
He can be a big baby and a future world champion. But setting that aside, what I love about your perspective is you've worked on both sides of academia and in industry, and the bane of our existence is peer review. And it's one of the most critical parts of what we do. What is the industry equivalent of peer review?
One of the things that surprised me is actually how similar things are. That often I will have an idea. I mean, essentially, a lot of the time they say, here is a very complicated large system, make it better. And so I'll have an idea about how to make it better. And I might write a brief proposal. And I will present that proposal at a team meeting. It's just like presenting at a seminar. So I present my proposal at a team meeting, and it has to be approved by a couple of people, but anyone can comment on it. just after I'd started, actually, I presented this proposal and somebody said, why do you choose that method? And I can't remember what the method was, but it was the kind of thing where you make an arbitrary choice. And so they asked this question. I thought, oh, no, here we go. I'm going to have to go back to my desk. I'm going to have to spend half a day digging out references and writing this introduction and justifying this. And then I'm going to have to come back. And I said, well, it's the best way. And they said, oh, good. Yeah, good. Jeremy says it's the best way. And then there's all this mumbling over there and says, oh, best way, yeah. Good, yeah, best way.
I didn't get a harumph out of that guy. Just a governor, harumph. Harumph?
And everyone just nodded. And I was like, what? And I spoke to my manager afterwards. And what happened? And they said, well, we hired you because you're supposed to know this stuff. If you say it, we believe you. And I was like, oh, okay. And then you do the study, collect data. You might use data that's lying around. You write it up. You then present at a second meeting. It gets approved. And then it might be something that then sort of happens.
What do you find the most fulfilling part of your job?
That's a really interesting question, because it's also about the kind of person that likes this job and the kind of person that doesn't like this job. I used to work in York with a guy called Martin Bland, who's kind of famous for the Bland-Altman plot. He used to say, what's the difference between a statistician and an epidemiologist? A statistician wants to know, what method do you use to find the causes of childhood asthma? An epidemiologist wants to know the causes of childhood asthma. The statistician doesn't really care what the answer is. I mean, I've worked on a lot of papers. I've worked with a lot of doctors doing all kinds of different things. And you meet people at parties and they say, oh, I work on hip replacements. And I say, oh, I did a paper on hip replacements. And they say, what did it find? And I say, I've got no idea. I don't really care about the answer very much. I care about how you get to the answer. So I work on ads. Nobody likes ads. Some people strongly dislike ads. Some people are sort of vaguely neutral about them. Nobody gets excited about ads. I never got excited about ads. In fact, my sister and brother-in-law worked in advertising for years in the UK, and I used to silently mock them because I was in academia making the world a better place, and they were selling to people.
I bet it was not that silent.
Oh, yeah. And then I worked selling to people. And I'm like, I made these ads better. And, the effect you have on the world is completely trivial. So I work on these raters. I make sure the reliability of the data are high and do things to improve the quality of the data. And what that means is that the data are higher quality. And what that means is that they are feeding a machine learning model with slightly better data. So the machine learning model will be different. And so when you go to your favorite search engine and you see an ad, but because I made better raters, you'll see a different ad. And that different ad might be slightly better. And then you might click on that ad and then my employer will make 10 cents. It makes enough of those 10 cents that I justify my existence. When you're in academia, you write a paper and you show your mom, you say, hey, mom, I wrote a paper, look. You work in ads and you say, mom says, what did you do? You say, well, I made raters and two specs. That doesn't matter. So what you find fulfilling is that you have solved a problem or that you have helped your colleagues to solve their problem.
As I'm listening to you talk, I'm trying to bridge the gap between the people that come into my program, the people that I train. I know how to make professors. I know how to make psychometricians. I don't know how to make people like you. How do I make people like you?
I think that the psychology programs are actually very good at making people like me and people who work in this sort of area, because we are very good at general problems and very good at thinking about things in different ways and then having to explain it. So it's all very well, you can do what you like, but you have to explain it to the stakeholder who doesn't necessarily know about it. The main thing psychologists do is quantitative UX research. It's usability research. And it's a lot of experimentation, a lot of measurement. I interview people and I used to feel intimidated. I would interview people with stats PhDs or math PhDs. And I think, what am I going to ask this person? Sometimes I ask people these very simple questions. I ask just about explaining a t-test to someone and I say, well, so we're taking the PDF of the t-distribution and we're going to, just tell them that it wasn't significant. That's all the way to say. Well, and when we look at the rejection area, which is depending on how we choose the value of alpha, just tell them the result. They just want to know what to do. One of the things I really like when I interview people is people who are interested in whatever it is they're doing, no matter how kind of boring it is. Mm-hmm. If you're interested in the problems you're solving and not about the thing you're trying to solve, I like that. One of the things I ask is, tell me about a project. You finish the project. I'm going to give you infinite funding and time. How do you redo the project? And I always think, if you get to the end of a project of any kind and you don't say, man, I wish I could throw that away and start again, because now I know how to do it properly. And some people say, no, we got an answer. And I'm like, I haven't even thought about it. The psychologists, they think about the implications of things. They think about why they're doing things. They think about the fact that it's people. You work with economists sometimes, and we had a survey question. The survey question was about environmental awareness. And the question was, do you turn the water off when you're brushing your teeth? And they say, 98% of people do that. I'm like, no, 98% of people said they do that. That's not the same thing. If you're an economist, you deal with dollars. Dollar is always a dollar. A dollar doesn't pretend to be a different dollar. It doesn't lie about how many dollars it is. It's just a dollar. You never need to think about kind of the quality of the data, but we need to think about the quality of the data a lot. People say, why do you do this data science thing on ads? And I'm like, it doesn't feel like data science or math or stats. It feels like psychology. It feels like I'm trying to work out what the effect of these things is on things in weird ways and how we ask the question and how it affects things. So I think psychologists are quite good at that, as long as they're kind of generalists. I interviewed somebody once, and he got to the end, and he looked very upset, and he hadn't done very well, and he said, I don't know anything about ads. And I'm like, they're not ads, they're objects, and they're assigned numbers. Doesn't matter what they were, it's just, I've got some objects, they got some numbers, I want to compare the groups of objects, and the objects are clustered.
So what can a young person do to increase the probability they get an opportunity to sit across from you and have an interview?
I think what they need to do is work on all sorts of different problems. Don't think about problems as being statistical problems. I am very, very, very good at regression. Therefore, everything is a regression problem. Not everything is a regression problem. Don't try and solve everything with a regression problem. Solve it with the appropriate technique. That's one of the reasons I kind of like structural equation modeling. I get to do very little structural equation modeling. It makes me very sad. I constantly seek out people that need some structural equation modeling inside the company. And the people that want it done think it's magic. They're like, I've got some really crap data, but you can extract causes from this by drawing arrows. I think, no, I can't. I'm so depressed. One of the things I like about structural equation modeling is it stops you thinking this sort of rigid 2x2 and over kind of way of thinking. It stops you saying there are these rules of thumb or rules. One of the things I hear people say sometimes is, you can't fit a categorical predictor and use a dummy variable that's got more than 10 categories or 20 categories. I'm like, look at this. I've got 1,000 category dummy predictor and it does exactly what I want it to do. So it's about being a generalist. It's about thinking about different ways to approach a problem.
What do you think are the biggest urban myths about working in industry from a quantitative methodological perspective?
One of the interesting ones is about the pay, actually. So you hear these stories about, there's been some recently about Meta have hired people for $10 million a year or something. My pay actually went down. My base salary went down when I moved from the RAND Corporation, which is essentially academia, to this technology company. I mean, they give you almost guaranteed a bonus, and you also get some pay in stock. So it kind of went up a bit, but you're paid in stock, and that is kind of not guaranteed. The price of the stock can vary dramatically. Your pay could go down tens of thousands of dollars from one year to the next because the stock dropped. I know a guy who thought about taking a job at Snapchat, and they pay you partly in stock, and the value of the stock dropped by 95%.
But ping pong, you had ping pong.
I mean, I guess that's another myth, actually, about the ping pong. You're kind of having fun all the time. It's fun if you think it's fun to solve problems and work with people to solve problems. It's not fun if you think that it's like grad school and playing ping pong and doing kind of what you want. You have to create value for the company. You have to justify your existence. I mean, another thing is that people think it must be incredibly hard work, or you're tied to your desk 9 till 5, or there's no work-life balance. That's a very interesting thing that I found, is that they care far more about work-life balance. They care far more about ensuring that you're happy. So I've recently changed manager, and in my old job I'd meet my manager once every year for 15 minutes, and they'd say, "What are you doing?" And I'd say, "Scholarly activity." And they would check my contract and it says, "Jeremy should do scholarly activity." And they say, "Oh, great, that's fine." You know, my new manager I've met like for 3 hours this week. We've had a conversation where he asked me, like, how do I know if you're stressed? What are the signs that you're stressed? What are the signs that you're not happy? What do you seek fulfillment from? What do you want to do with this? Very many episodes ago, Patrick mentioned attaboys. In academia, you don't get any attaboys. No one says good job and pats you on the head. Because if you're kind of publishing and getting grants and things, you're doing well, and nobody says good job. within my company, there are all these public attaboys. They really do seem to care about me as a person. Another thing, some people are stricter about this than others, but there is not a culture of working outside of hours. Like, if you want to work outside of hours, you are fine, but don't expect anyone else to. Someone I know sent an email to a group of people on I think it was Sunday afternoon. They were told not to do that. You can email one person on a Sunday afternoon, but if you email 20 people and a couple of them reply, and then there was a conversation, and then some people missed out on the conversation, well, next weekend they feel obliged to check their email on a Sunday. And so some people put in their signature something like, my hours aren't your hours. I sometimes work strange hours. The fact that I have sent you an email in the evening does not mean I expect a reply in the evening. Whereas my spouse is a professor, and she sits there and says, I emailed my project coordinator 2 hours ago and they haven't replied yet. What's the problem? And I say, it's 10 o'clock Saturday night. It's like...
Part of my internet stalking tracked you down to some crazy back mountain skiing.
Oh, indeed, yes. The Buckhorn Ski Club.
It does look like you maintain a really nice work-life balance.
Yeah, and they do care about that. And actually, part of that is about doing things at work. So you can have a 20% project. So I work, in theory, 20% of my time in the health department. Sometimes they're doing experiments. I often do a power analysis or things like that. You can volunteer for some number of days a year. And if you do voluntary work for another organization, they will pay them $10 per hour for every hour you worked for them. So I went on this field trip with my kids' school. And I said, do I need to take vacation? I said, no, that's volunteering. And I took my kids. They no, it's volunteering. And then I said, well, I did 40 hours work. And said, okay, yeah, give us the address. We'll send them a check for $400. Another thing that happened that was very cool is a few years ago, there were some big fires in Malibu. And if your house burns down in a fire, you can go to the government and say, my house burned down in a fire. I need help. And they say, well, okay, we're going to have to send someone out there to make sure your house burned down and check it out and look at it. And then we'll sort you out. But that takes them quite a long time. And they said, well, who's really good at driving around streets and taking lots of photographs of houses? Oh, large technology company that you might have heard of that also has a maps division. And so I spent a couple of days with somebody else driving around to these, it was quite depressing, fires, and taking photographs. We had a camera strapped to the top of the car, and we took thousands of photographs of houses and geolocated them. So you could say, oh, look, here's my house. It's burnt down. Was, okay, I've got 8,000 photos of houses. Before I publish them, I can't have any faces or any identifiable license plates on a car. I could probably use your favorite LLM for doing that now, but back then you couldn't. How can we remove these? I said, well, I've got thousands of ads raters. I'll just say, hey, instead of rating ads today, we're looking at photos and clicking if there's a face or a license plate. So to filter 8,000 photos, it took 2 hours, and then we're getting the photos. Yeah, so you can do kind of cool things like that.
Wow. So, Jeremy, as we wrap up and look back on all the things that you have been through, you've been through academia and you've been in a more traditional research industry, you've been where you are now. Is there anything that you would do differently looking back?
I would have made the move years before. I didn't realize that they wanted people like me, and I would have done it before.
Really?
Maybe that's because I wasn't a very good academic, but I found academia too hard. I can't do it. In a very early episode, you talked about as you become more senior as an academic, it's almost like a small business. You spend your time hiring people and firing people and doing accounting, and I'm not very good at that, and I don't like doing it. I want to sit and write code to solve problems. And I found that, I moved to a tech company, and that's what I do. I sit and write code to solve problems. Even though I'm moderately senior, no one expects me to worry about the budget. No one expects me to worry about the hiring and firing. That's somebody else's job. I just sit and write code and have meetings about how we're going to solve these problems. So I would have done it way before if I'd realized.
Now, just to put in context, you co-authored a book that has 20,000 citations. So when you said that you're not particularly good at it, but that's a really nice point to end on. You wish you had done it sooner.
I find it more relaxing. I find it easier. I find it takes less time. I find it's less stressful.
So, Jeremy, clearly you have extraordinarily poor judgment because you've listened to the podcast for a very long time.
Absolutely.
So you probably know I have a bromance with Kai Ryssdal on Marketplace.
I always listen to Marketplace first.
Do you?
Like, I've listened to all, now I have to go to Quantitude because I've run out of marketplaces. This traffic is awful.
Wow.
I am totally cool with that because everyone should listen to Kai Ryssdal first. One of his questions that I love is...
So we're going to end as we do with the Make Me Smart question. What is something you thought you knew but found out you were wrong about?
Oh, that I thought I knew before. Well, that's a good question. I mean, I always thought that George Russell was better than Lewis Hamilton, and now I know it.
God!
Good reaction time for Lewis Hamilton. George Russell putting the pressure on Max Verstappen. Hamilton got the launch off the line, goes around the outside, he's hit his teammate. Lewis Hamilton turns into George Russell, and the Mercedes collide.
Oh my God, this episode is not going to air. We are at 80 minutes and 49 seconds, and I am deleting it. Dr. Miles, we are done. Thank you so much.
Yeah, thank you. That was fun.
We hope it was useful for folks out there, too, who are thinking about this as a possible career path.
Thank you, Jeremy.
Thank you.
Thanks so much for joining us. You can subscribe to Quantitude on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, or many other places you can find using to locate. In fact, even though we're an audio podcast, you can even find us on video platforms like You can also follow us on X, Blue Sky, or Instagram, where we are at Quantitude Pod. And visit our website, quantitudepod.org, where you can leave us a message, find organized playlists, show notes, course syllabi, and other fun stuff. Finally, get cool Quantitude merch from redbubble.com, where all proceeds from non-bootleg authorized Quantitude Pod merch go to donorschoose.org to help support low-income schools. Today's episode has been sponsored by
Hi, this is Elon Musk. My team of efficiency specialists, who up until now have been on hiatus shotgunning 12 packs of Red Bull and playing Call of Duty Warzone, has been contracted by Google. Who did that? We've been contracted to look into whether the current episode of Quantitude contains any potentially objectionable content by Dr. Miles. Other than his affinity for F1 racer George Russell, we have found that Dr. Miles' discussion of who keeps doing that, as well as his frequent mention of and damn it, stop that. We found that. That's it. I am going to and you will be hearing from
This legal thing is fun. You've been listening to Quantitude, the podcast done by people in academia who make you wonder, if this is academic, then what the heck is non-academic?